Welcome, it's SVPod. And a funny thing happened on the way to October the 12th. The Saturday everyone was looking forward to. They've had it circled since the summer. That was going to be the big weekend in college football, and it still will be. But this one, this sleepy Saturday with only one ranked versus ranked matchup, this was the sport in a nutshell. As my boy Stanford Steve likes to say, buckle up. It's too late. If you weren't buckled up, you got ejected long, long ago. Speaking of Stanford Steve, he is in parts unknown. A lousy day for Steve to be traveling. Now, I guess he's involved in some private aviation. Otherwise, what flight are you on from California to Kansas City at this point? Because as I speak, this is a first. We sat down to start the pod. It's 2:44 in the morning on a day of abject chaos in all directions. And in the end, I was prepared to say 1, 4, 8, 9, 10, and 11 all lost. But they didn't. Because for the second consecutive week, as the saying down in South Florida goes, we got some Canes over here. I don't know how you did it, but when Cal had to settle for a field goal to go up 38-18, you could make a little tiny pinhole, and you could look through it and go, you know, Cam Ward, I don't know. You don't want to leave that. You don't want to leave the door ajar for that dude. But still, I mean, a lot would have to happen. And it did. I'm trying to process it. I have a card with so much shit on it, I don't even know. The card began with me writing down, North Carolina had a 19-play, 81-yard drive that took up 9 minutes of clock and got 0 points. That was 100 years ago. That happened. Pitt's 5-0. Hail to Pitt. I've lost track of a lot. I'm trying to make sense of what Miami did. A ton of it is Ward. A ton of it's Cal. The hardest thing to do, you've heard me say this through the years. My friend Gary Williams, the Hall of Fame coach from the University of Maryland, won a national championship. He always said, hardest thing to do is to play with a lead. Because you tend not to play the way you played to build the lead. You tend to play to protect it. And what else do you hear me often say? You can't fake desperation. Miami played like a desperate team. I don't know how you leave Restrepo wide open and give up a 77-yard pass on the first play of a drive that started at Miami's 8-yard line, 5-yard line, whatever the hell it was. At the 8. That's a catastrophe. And Cam Ward does what Cam Ward does. 35 of 53, 437. Decent night. And for a fan base that is so quick to throw up your hands and be the victims and everyone hates us and the world's out to get us and all the rest, that's 2 weeks in a row, y'all. 2 weeks in a row. Last week, touchdown on the field, Virginia Tech? No touchdown. According to Twitter, I still call it Twitter, X, I get it. That was either the surest example of targeting on Mendoza, or he hit him with his shoulder first. Besant, right? I thought the top of the helmet hit his helmet like you could hear it. I played it back like you could hear that telltale plastic on plastic. But I'm the first to say it's a physical game, and these bang-bang plays, if you're going to let it go, that doesn't trouble me. I didn't feel like it was a violent hit. It was a hard hit. And I thought that it was helmet on helmet. But that's 2 weeks in a row Miami benefits massively because if it's targeting, it's game over. It wasn't. You get the ball and then Restrepo, Ward, touchdown. I can't believe Miami won that football game. All the credit in the world to that team. And it was about to be a bookend day of the highest order for the folks at Cal. I salute all of you that showed up early. It's pitch black outside. You guys come out for game day. Marshawn's there. It is a scene. My guy Steve said yesterday, and he came and he trolled you a little bit with the Stanford stuff, and then Coach Saban off the top rope. Yeah, if you didn't like Cal, why'd your girlfriend go here? He didn't know about the Alpha Phi stories. I don't know if I'm supposed to know about him. All I know is just Alpha Phi. Apparently, shouts to the Alpha Phis worldwide, wherever you are. An incredible scene at Berkeley. You guys play your butts off. You're gonna win. And then you don't. What did Ott finish with? That's not right. He only had 75. He had 75 receiving yards. Odd box score for Cal. I just can't figure out how they lost the game. On this day where it looked like it was 1-4, 8, 9, 10, 11 lose, 8 does not. And that on its own is massive. Ward's performance, again, is massive. It's the kind of stuff that, his season numbers are outrageous, and he's plays like this, nights like this. You go to New York when you do stuff like this. It's pretty simple. And them winning tonight the way they did, that's what great players do. If you leave the door ajar, great players, great teams figure out a way to walk through it. But in the same breath, I'm going to tell you, if you keep messing around, Cristobal's clock, it's like an algebra equation for that dude, figuring out how to manage stuff. You keep messing around like this, and you're not gonna stay clean. But days like this are great reminders. With a dozen teams making it to the playoffs, you're going to have some wiggle room because 5 of the top 11 lost today. So very few people are going to be perfect when all's said and done. The obvious stunner of the day is Vanderbilt beating Alabama on the field. Before I get to the football, I just would like to say, to those folks that were carrying the goalposts down Broadway and dumped it in the Cumberland River, well done. I tip my cap. I'm not wearing a cap, but there you go. Up until this point, and the real ones know, the high water mark to me for Vanderbilt celebrations, those of you that know. If I say Fidel Rocky Top, you're laughing out loud. Because there's a video when they beat Tennessee of the Fidel house playing a banjo picking version of Rocky Top. And there are people doing a hoedown in the front yard, including a dude on a broken leg. I think I'm loopy because I've been watching football for a dozen hours. I'm also just laughing because it's funny. Just keep listening to the podcast, but later make a note, a mental note or an actual note. Watch the video of Vanderbilt trolling the Tennessee fans leaving Nashville doing Rocky Top. You beat it tonight. You topped it. You threw goalposts in a river after you beat number 1 for the first time ever. And here is the thing. Diego Pavia, on a field with Heisman Trophy candidates, was the best player in the field. Now, I know. Receiver for Bama, pretty good. He's 17. Ryan Williams, pretty good. But Diego Pavia today, Alabama couldn't get him off the field. And that's the truth. They could not get him off the field. He accounted for 300 yards plus. Vanderbilt possessed the ball for 42 minutes because Bama's defense couldn't get him off the field. That's not a sentence that's ever been said out loud. Not never. They couldn't. They couldn't get Pavia off the field. He dropped a bunch of F-bombs and whatever afterwards on TV. No one cares anymore. People cuss. He was happy. He had a ton of his family there. It was an electrifying scene for them to get the ball back. And it looked like the Bama script and the Miami script felt very similar. Miami just was able to do what Bama wasn't. Because Miami was able to get off the field, targeting, no targeting, got the ball, and their quarterback, their Heisman guy, Cam Ward, did Heisman shit. Touchdown, play the fight song, we win. After Bama runs a trick play, flips it to Williams, they scored so fast. That's why part of the reason why their time of possession, like Bama would get it and score like that. But every time that they would get to the point where it felt like Vanderbilt might crumble, they never did. That's the most impressive thing to me about this win. You've heard me say through the years, I get sick of saying the same stuff all the time, but I've done this 20-something years, and it's just, when I see this, I'm going to say it every time. It was an upset, but it wasn't an accident. Because it's a massive upset. They're 22-point underdog. So it's an upset. But it wasn't a fluke. There's one deflection, Milroe throws it, it gets popped up in the air, and it's a pick six and puts Vanderbilt up 14. Is that fluky? A little? That's football. They made a play. They had a strip sack. But Pavia just got first downs when it mattered. They couldn't get him off the field. You saw Bama was furious. They're like, this doesn't make any sense. Coach Saban said the only easy place to win is there. And he's been right. Like, you control him. But half the stadium's always the road team. It was when Virginia Tech came in this year and you beat them. It was when Bama came in and you beat them. Like, that's just what it is. You're a small school. So when you storm the field, it doesn't look like what it looked like in Washington today or what it looked like in Arkansas today. But you guys were awesome. It was just an incredible football game. And all the scenes of Broadway, dumping the goalposts. It was that's the one of all of these that makes the least sense. Just because historically there's no precedent for it. Vanderbilt's never done it. They've forever been the punchline. And today they weren't. And as a program, they're not. Like, this is the kind of thing that is a step forward. They're not in the same weight class week in and week out, but they're also not the punchline that they were. And all credit to them for that. That was a shocker. Tennessee losing at Arkansas, also a shocker. Before he got hurt, Taylon Green, the quarterback for Arkansas, was really, really special. Made plays. Arkansas dominated a football game as thoroughly as a game can be dominated for 30 minutes and led only 3-0. And that's the kind of thing that when it happens and you're the dog, they're a 2-touchdown dog. If you dominate a game like that and don't have a bigger lead, they missed a field goal right before the end of half. They had a wide open guy, just a total bust, and Green didn't see him. And so instead of being up 10-0 or 6-0, you're up 3-0. Tennessee gets the ball coming out of the locker room, right down the field, Rocky Top, touchdown. Get the ball back, touchdown. 8 minutes to go in the third, and the number 4 team's up 14-3. And now, all right, we're good. Everybody, Vol Nation, deep breath, we're good. Except you weren't. You weren't. And right after that second touchdown, Tennessee, that was the most important part of that game. They answered with a touchdown. They had to. They had to show that they were going to stay in the fight. And they did. And then I thought Arkansas's defense was just really good. Really, really good all night. And they managed to, combination of Nico and Heupel, and just offensively, they didn't have rhythm. They didn't stay on the field. And I I'm not going to sit here and say they got spooked. I just think when Arkansas scored that touchdown, it let both teams know, oh, this is real, right? They signed up for 60 and all that. That's what it felt like anyway. They got Florida. Tennessee's got Florida next week. And it's not a looking down the road. It's the SEC. Everybody knows the score. You don't look past anybody. I don't think that's what that was. I just think Arkansas has played well this year. They played A&M to a 4-point game last week, I believe. A&M spanked Missouri. What was that score? 41-10. There's a couple of teams that I just want to reference just because their defenses stood out to me today. A&M, that defensive front, they more than doubled up Missouri. Really impressive. Obviously, they lost that first one to Notre Dame, but that's might as well been 100 years ago. People are looking way down the road. Texas and A&M, you really going to start talking about what they could be in November after today? Let's just say that today A&M was dominant. They got some help from the officials early. Missouri people were furious. Can't say I blame you. It wasn't all refs. It was more the team in maroon than it was them. But there was some help. But that defensive front from A&M, they get after you. The Penn State defense is nasty. UCLA's offense is not great. But Penn State's defensive front is another one I wanted to reference. Ohio State, now, is it their defense or is it the fact that they're playing Iowa? Probably a little bit of both. Emeka Egbuka, we talk about Jeremiah. He had another incredible catch, the freshman from Ohio State. But Egbuka had 3 touchdowns. That wide receiver room at Ohio State continues to be just obscene. But those 3 defenses I had circled that I wanted to kind of reference together, and I did that, trying to keep tabs. It's hard doing a one-man thing, trying to make sense of today. I'm going to forget somebody for sure, but I gave you that Carolina note from 12:30. 19 plays, 81 yards, no points. Pitt 5-0. Army and Navy are 5-0. First time they've both been 5-0 since 1945. They won today on the road, combined 83-14. They're both good football teams. Not good for service academies, good football teams. They both play Notre Dame. I'm saying it at 3 o'clock in the morning because who gives a shit? One of them's going to beat them. How about that? Write it down. Or don't. One of them's going to beat them. Because they're both really good. Notre Dame and Army. We get back to the upset. Washington beating Michigan, not an upset. And this is one of those pet peeve things. Washington was the favorite on the field. So they were favored on the field. The Jed Fish era gets its first big sort of, you call it a national championship rematch. No, it's not. It's October. A bunch of dudes on both sides are playing on Sundays. Not the same thing. But it's a huge win for him. Will Rogers, the transfer, played well. They jumped out to a 14-0 lead, lost the lead, scored the game's last 10 points. They continue to have just horrendous problems in the kicking game. You got to sort that out. But your home field's spectacular, both aesthetically and in terms of actual on-field application. That's a big win, not an upset. They beat what was Michigan, 11? 10? I've lost track. They were one of those ranked teams. Minnesota beats USC. SC's got Penn State at home next week. And this is where I think the grind of the Big Ten, both travel and sort of level of consistency, that just it's different styles of play. It's different places, time zone wise. Maybe that's an excuse. It feels like that's what I'm doing right now. I think more than anything, it's the old Coach Corso. You don't get the same team 2 weeks in a row. They rallied from down double digits last week against Wisconsin. Actually took the lead over Minnesota and then gave up the last 14 in this game. That was a huge win. Huge win. Ski-U-Mah, Minnesota on the field. I might as well say it because I haven't done it yet. A lot of these teams that I'm mentioning, Vanderbilt, Minnesota. Who else did I get? Winners went 6-0. I wish more than anything Steve were here just so I could scream at the top of my lungs. Winners went 6-0. It's been a struggle. We have been on the struggle bus, but we trust the process. And by the way, there were winners everywhere that we didn't give out. Loved Cal. Doesn't matter. You go 6-0, you know what you do? Again, we quote Coach Corso. I might be getting it wrong, but the essence is when you lose, say little. When you lose, say nothing. Say little. When you win, say less. When you lose, say little. When you win, say less. So I'll say less. Say less. What upsets have I missed? I got you. I gave you the Army. I gave you the stats. I said one of them's going to beat Notre Dame. I don't know if that's true or not, but I said it, and I'm on a heater. Let's stick with that. I mentioned the Pitt 5-0 start. That's the first time since '91 for them. Still, Miami, obviously, and I think Clemson, they continue to look the part in the ACC, are the best teams in that league. I watched the SMU Louisville game. I want to reference that game just because is the kind of thing that if I would have spent more time on it if all the rest of this nonsense didn't happen today. But it was an entertaining game. SMU, and it's like Cal's an ACC team, which doesn't make any sense. So's SMU. Makes less sense just from a geographic standpoint. But that was a good football game. They held on and won, and I want to get their numbers because I can't read my writing. You know, when Steve says I can't read my writing. Yeah, it's 400 yards. Kevin Jennings responsible for basically 400 yards of offense, and they get the win in Louisville. They're 5-1. It's a good football team, SMU. I want to go back a day to another one of the winners. Gave you Cuse over UNLV, and I want to just mention a guy who lost. Linebacker for Vegas named Jackson Woodard. What a football player. Almost had a pick that would have put the game to bed. Couldn't squeeze it. It allowed Syracuse to get a touchdown. They won it in overtime. A couple of tremendous performances. It was a standalone game, so I was just jotting this down. I want to reference him. It was Ricky Wright, Oronde Gadsden, two wide receivers that had spectacular nights for the Rebs and the Orange. And the Orange won that one on the field. That was a ranked team that went down. I don't know how high Indiana's going to be ranked after this week, but they're already bowl eligible. Coach Cignetti hasn't lost, and he brought a bunch of guys with him from Madison. Rourke, the transfer from Ohio, has been just excellent. This is where like you see the way the portal goes, and dudes get cash. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. That's a perfect fit. A perfect fit. An adult that knows how to play the way Cignetti wants him to play. Doesn't have to be spectacular. They value the football. They don't turn it over. They don't get penalized. I mean, they just play winning football. And so far, they've won every game they played. Now, still, like, what's their best win? I mean, they beat Maryland last week. They were a touchdown favorite there. Northwestern's not great. They actually have a huge game next week with Nebraska. Nebraska's defense is good. Everyone talks Raiola and the quarterback. Shout out to the black shirts. We see you. They held Rutgers to 7 today. Rutgers has been playing pretty well. But the Nebraska, I did not have Nebraska, Indiana circled in that October 12th showdown games. That's a gigantic football game. No shit. Indiana, Nebraska. Huge game next week. Won't get any attention or love. No one will talk about it. I just did. I know actually, maybe that's 2 weeks from now. Caught myself. Believe Indiana's got a bye week. I can't be expected to know every single person's schedule, but I'm pretty sure IU has a bye week, and then it's Nebraska. So I believe I caught myself there. Ohio State ahead of its game against Oregon, and Oregon played on a Friday night. That was a bad beat. Michigan State kicked a late field goal. We'll probably talk about that on Monday. Both teams did exactly what you want to see them do. ahead of a gigantic game, which is handle your business. It was Ohio State was close. They scored touchdowns on 4 consecutive second-half drives, which is hard to do against Iowa's defense. But Ohio State's loaded. Ohio State's a small favorite in that game, which is really interesting to me because, I don't know, Oregon at home, it's a conference game, which feels insane, but it is. And they're a small home dog. I wonder the last time they were a home dog. Stanford Steve probably knows that. But he's traveling, allegedly. Sorry. Everyone was pissed that Steve was eating Lunchables. That was me sipping a Diet Coke. What do you want from me? I'm going to keep doing live time. 3:09 a.m. If I pass out, someone come. Oscar, if I pass out, come get me, all right? Among the notes worth mentioning, Ashton Jeanty continues to be an absolute wrecking ball. I'm glad that very first one of these we did, he went nuts, and we sort of started talking about him because Boise's interesting. Boise was like this. They became a brand name. They became a place where it was like a launching pad for coaches to go to big-time places. And then we, and I don't mean we in media, I just think we in general, I think we moved on from the blue turf and whatever, and they became, like, they haven't been bad, but they've been lost a little bit in the shuffle. Is that fair to say? But they have an incredible player who had like 180 and 3 touchdowns, I believe, at halftime against Utah State. I'm just going to outwardly root for them to make the playoff on the back end just because it would be a blast to see some team from the deep end have to play them. I mean, somebody from probably the SEC, maybe the Big Ten, probably the SEC. They wouldn't want to. He wouldn't get 300. He wouldn't get 300 yards against him, but he wouldn't get 40 either. He's a spectacular player. They are 21st in the land. 4-1. Their one loss came in a battle up at Eugene. And I'm starting to look at their schedule and like I'm not just after today. What's the point? They do play UNLV. That's sort of their one kind of profile game. They play Oregon State at the end of the year, but I mean, Jeanty's on a outrageous pace, like 2,400, I believe it is, yards. He's on pace for it at the moment. Spectacular. As we speak, he's at highlights. You can't catch him. And then if you get him, you can't get him on the ground. Incredible balance. I'm trying to think who the losses today, none are eliminating. Just none are eliminating. And that's probably better. Because in the past, there'd be a loss, and then it would be this massive weight on the scale where we'd say we're going to hold it against you, and then maybe we do and maybe we don't. But now I think everybody just kind of goes, what are you going to do? People are going to lose games. People are going to lose games. Either Oregon or Ohio State leave next week with a loss by rule, right? USC's done if they lose a third game in October. But Penn State hasn't lost. That defense, again, is just spectacular. Really, really good. And Aller's more. They're more capable, it feels like, offensively. Even though they still don't have superstar wide receivers, they don't need them, especially with the defense that they've got. But I don't think Tennessee's loss is anything other than probably a decent wake-up call before you have some huge games down the road. That OU win, the way they won early, whole lot of talk about them. Losing to Arkansas, not the worst thing that could happen to you. Missouri was kind of flirting with fire. And that A&M team, as I told you at the beginning, I think is really good. Michigan's, they're not close to what they were last year. And it's not their fault. They lost 15 people at the NFL and their coach. But Michigan, looking at their schedule, they're not done losing games. They could lose at Illinois. They got Oregon, Indiana, Ohio State. Like Michigan's, they're not close to as good as they were last year. The good news is they've got last year. And that's the winter coat that'll keep you warm for the rest of your life. Your guy Tuttle came in and was zipping it around, by the way, at quarterback. That was interesting. Maybe you found your guy. Because you have to complete forward passes at some point. Who haven't I mentioned? Iowa State's unbeaten still. That Baylor losing that Colorado game is going to be crippling to them. They had them beat and lost. And now it's like feels like everything's wobbly. And looking at Iowa State's schedule, I'm like, where's the giant test for them? West Virginia, they were on one of my screens today. You guys went to Stillwater and outgained them by like 350 yards. That was an absolute whooping that you put on Oklahoma State, who's now dropped 3 in a row. Neil Brown's guys were just wood. It was just a wood chipper today. So I don't know. At Morgantown, you never know. That could be a tricky spot. UCF got smoked again. Florida looked pretty good tonight. They should have been in winners. I just forgot about them. They play at Tennessee next week. Texas Tech, Kansas lost another heartbreaker to Arizona State. I'm just looking at Iowa State's schedule. I'm trying to find something that feels like, whoa, that feels like a lot. At Utah and then Kansas State. But that league, it feels BYU's certainly in the mix. They don't play them. But Iowa State stays perfect. I didn't see. I saw. I'm gonna just admit all I saw of that game were highlights. I know you were behind early, and then you were up. So I was like, I'm good there. Clemson, I think, covered late, which was kind of dirty. But that has to be satisfying for them and Dabo. People were writing his obit early. I've been saying for the last 3 or 4 weeks, nah, sir. You need to wake up on that one. I give Ole Miss credit for their. You go into South Carolina after it's the old bounce back sort of scenario. Huge credit to them for that in advance of their trip down to Baton Rouge in a gigantic game next week. But they jumped South Carolina. They're up early, like 14-0, and South Carolina just never made a game of it. That's what you want. That's the script you're dreaming of. That's the kind of script you expect for like a Bama at Vanderbilt, because that's what it's been forever. And it just wasn't today, because today was just one of those days. So I take a deep breath and I exhale and I look at my card and I'm like, what am I forgetting? I think today's the day of the headlines, right? Today's the day of the headlines of Bama, Tennessee, Missouri, Michigan, USC. This week before the Monster Showdown weekend, all of them lose. What's the common denominator? Road game, road game, road game, road game, road game. Well, I'll be. It's a great reminder of one of the cliches we say week in and week out about these are 18 to 20. Well, actually now you got some dudes that are mostly 18 to 23-year-old young people. They get patted on the back. Now you got NIL. Dudes are, and they should. They got cash in their pocket. It's hard. Coach Saban talks about that rat poison. It's hard to avoid it. It's human nature. You're Bama and you just beat Georgia a week ago. Go on the road and play Vanderbilt. You kick their ass every year forever. No, they never had Pavia. Now they do. Tennessee, I thought Tennessee's an interesting one, because at 14-3, that's a game you're supposed to win. That one's a wee bit troubling. Missouri got smashed. And again, Missouri probably was ranked where they were because they started the year high, and even though they hadn't looked spectacular, they ascend simply because others lost. If you're not going to step forward, we will. Then you go down and just step into a cauldron. It's hot as hell. Giga Maggies. And they jump you early. Michigan I just don't think's that great. Not a bad football team, but I don't know. If they finished with 4 losses, would that be shocking? Not at all. Not at all. And SC's I like them. I like them, but I picked Minnesota plus points. I didn't think they'd lose that game outright. That's a tough one because the Penn State team that's coming to your joint next week is real. So, like that's the kind of Lincoln Riley game where people that sort of they want to knock him. Like these are the games the games I should say that great coaches and great teams mostly don't lose. A game where you have the lead in the second half. Bama could never get the lead, which as I said at the start was as impressive as anything to me about the way Vanderbilt operated that game. They led. They played from in front. Every time Bama got close, they answered. They never let Bama get in front of them. Never. That's really impressive because it's hard as hell to do. Look at what happened to Cal. Like I said, down 20, you could see the path. I mean, the math's pretty simple. Well, if they score 3 touchdowns, but think about what's required in doing that. It's the scores and the stops. And a great team with a transcendent player in Cam Ward, is he that? I mean, you look at the last 2 weeks. Do they win either game without him? Hell no, they don't. But they got him. So the fact that they were able to, and again, where were they? On the road in Berkeley. Conference game. Sure. On a day where teams had chances, Michigan took a lead, USC took a lead, Tennessee had the lead. They couldn't hold on. Miami was left for dead. And because of Cam now, they're in that Freddy Krueger territory. You better make sure, and I'm not a horror movie aficionado. I think it was Michael Myers that ended up at the bottom of a lake. I don't know. Well, he didn't stay there. His ass came back up on a boat with a hatchet. Maybe Freddy Krueger did too. I don't know. None of them stayed dead is the point. Well, Miami, you better make sure that they're finished, and there better be zeros on the clock if you want to celebrate against that team. That was 2 weeks in a row. Little help? Yeah, little help. Miss me with the conspiracy theory. Like, miss me. People could just be incompetent. It's not part of some larger sort of, hey, it's not targeting. I don't know. Again, according to Twitter, it was either the textbook definition of it or he led with his shoulder. People see what they want to see. I don't know. I saw awesome football. And again, I want to mention the unbeatens that are not part of this otherwise conversation of this incredible day. IU's great start at 6-0. Pitt's 5-0 start, first time in a while. Army and Navy, both 5-0, first time since 45. And they boat raced a couple of teams on the road. I think there's a lot of stats from the day, but you just see these things. It's Army's biggest win over Air Force since like 78, which, talking to Steve about that, I was like, I kind of like Air Force just to be able to hang around. He goes, they know exactly what Navy does, but yeah, but Navy's a little different now. A bunch of the highlights, if you're watching both Army and Navy, they're actually throwing passes, some trick plays. Again, they're both. Those are two good football teams. I say one of them beats Notre Dame. And again, Carolina had a very long drive. That's where the day started for me. That's the first note on the card. And Stanford Steve made fun of people from Cal and said, none of you got into Stanford. They showed the video, by the way, where his arm broke in half. Not great. That's a tough dude, man. And he said it hurt a lot. Like, I can just tell you, like, that's a guy, you could hit him in the head with a snow shovel and he'd keep coming. Like me, that'd be the end of it. So when he tells me something hurt a lot, I just think, oh, I don't want to picture that. And then I saw the video of the poor dude laying on the ground, his arm's going the wrong way. But he played in the Rose Bowl with a friggin' jungle gym on his arm. All right, it's 3:30 in the morning. We got flag football in a few hours, and then I got SportsCenter late at night. Tuesday, Steve and I'll be back post trip to Arrowhead, and I'll give you the first pitch story. I showed up in Baltimore when we talked last on Tuesday. I was telling you about that. It was an amazing thing. I showed up and they scored 1 run in 2 games. They could blame me, although they've kind of been on a bad run in the postseason that predates me throwing out a first pitch. But I can give you a little bit of that because there's some backstory stuff that's just none of it could possibly have happened, but somehow it did. This is totally unrelated, obviously, to college football, but as the playoffs are in the mix, there's nothing. Playoff hockey is pretty close, maybe even worse. Overtime playoff hockey might be the worst single stress there is, but the Orioles had bases loaded in the 5th inning in Game 2 and nobody out, and they didn't score, and I wanted to pull a tree out of the ground. The rage that was inside me. It's just the stress of playoff baseball. It's great to be reminded of it, right? I rooted for a team that won like 50 games for a few years. So can't be too pissed, but good God, playoff baseball stress. High. Stanley Cup overtime, probably the worst. None of this has anything to do with college football. It's 3:30 in the morning. We got flag bright and early. I appreciate you being with us. Incredible day. Shout to the folks in Nashville one more time. Took the goalpost down Broadway, dumped it in the Cumberland. And your homework as you stop listening to this, just you're on the internet already or adjacent. Just go watch the finals in Nashville and watch the dude with the cast do the little dance. You're welcome. We'll see y'all Tuesday. Happy Sunday.